Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this scene. You're walking into a room for an important meeting. Maybe it's a job interview. Maybe it's the first date you've been waiting for. Maybe it's just meeting someone new at a party. You straighten your clothes, take a breath, tell yourself, I just need to be myself. But here's the secret no one tells you. Before you even sit down, before you've spoken a single word, before you've had the chance to show who you really are, they've already decided something about you. In those first few seconds, their brain has already made a call. Do I like this person? Do I trust them? Do they seem competent? Or should I keep my guard up? And here's the really unsettling part. Once that judgment is made, it's sticky. It doesn't just vanish. Everything you do afterward is interpreted through that lens. If they thought you were confident, every smile, every gesture, every word will be seen as proof of that. If they thought you seemed insecure, every pause or slip up will only confirm it. Think about how powerful that is. The course of a conversation, the outcome of an interview, the beginning of a relationship, all of it can be tilted one way or another in just a few blinks. In fact, research from Princeton University shows that people form impressions about your trustworthiness in just 1/10 of a second. 1/10. That's faster than the time it takes to snap your fingers, faster than your eyes can blink. Your resume doesn't matter yet. Your carefully chosen words haven't been spoken. The first chapter of your story with someone else has already been written without your permission, and the consequences, they echo far beyond that single moment. The colleague who got promoted instead of you. Maybe their first impression simply carried more weight. The date that never called back. Maybe it wasn't the dinner conversation, but the nervous way you greeted them at the door. The stranger who became a lifelong friend. Perhaps it started with nothing more than the warmth in your smile the very first time you met. First impressions shape opportunities, relationships, reputations, silently, invisibly, constantly. And the truth is, we like to think we're rational beings who make decisions carefully, based on evidence, logic, fairness. But more often than not, we're simply justifying the impression we already made in those first fleeting seconds. That's what makes first impressions so fascinating and so dangerous. They're quick, they're sticky, and they're often unfair. But here's the good news. Once you understand how they work, you can learn how to shape them. Today we're diving into the hidden science of first impressions, how they're made, why they matter, and what you can do to master them. Because whether we admit it or not, the story people tell about you often begins long before you've spoken a word. Welcome to Think Easy Podcast, the place where we dive into the hidden layers of psychology, emotions, and human behavior that quietly shape our lives. I'm Zuno, and if you've been following this podcast, you already know that we often uncover truths that are both surprising and uncomfortably familiar. Today's topic is one that touches all of us, no matter who you are, where you live, or what you do. For because every single relationship you've ever had, every job you've landed or lost, every friend who stayed, every stranger who walked away, all of them have been influenced by one simple, invisible force: first impressions. Think about it. The teacher who believed in you from the start, the boss who decided you had leadership potential, the person who said yes to a second date. None of these moments began with your resume, your grades, or your carefully chosen words. They began with seconds, fleeting, fragile seconds, where your body language, your face, your tone of voice, sent signals you didn't even know you were sending. And here's the paradox. We live in a world that tells us not to judge a book by its cover. Yet our brains are wired to do exactly that. To size someone up instantly. It's a survival instinct, millions of years old. But in today's world, that instinct can make or break opportunities long before we even realize what's happening. So in this episode, we're going to explore the hidden science behind first impressions, how they're formed in the brain, why they're so stubborn once they're made, and most importantly, what you can do to shape them with intention. Because whether it's walking into an interview, meeting someone new, or just saying hello at a coffee shop, those few seconds are more powerful than you think. Let me begin with a story. Actually, let me give you two very different stories, because they show just how much first impressions can change everything. Sarah was brilliant. She had studied hard, graduated near the top of her class, and built an impressive resume with years of real experience. On paper, she was the perfect candidate. She had an interview for her dream job, the kind of role she had imagined herself in for years, and she prepared. Oh, she prepared like her life depended on it. She rehearsed every answer to every possible question. She researched the company inside and out. She picked the perfect outfit. She told herself, I just need to get in that room, and they'll see how capable I am. But when the big day came, nerves took over. The moment she walked into the interview room, her body betrayed her. Her shoulders slouched inward. She smiled, but it looked forced. She avoided steady eye contact, afraid of staring too long. And when the interviewer reached out for a handshake, hers was soft, hesitant, almost apologetic. None of these things were catastrophic. She didn't say anything wrong. She didn't answer poorly. But within the first 10 seconds, the interviewer's brain had already made a decision. She doesn't seem confident. And from that moment, everything Sarah said was filtered through that lens. Her thoughtful pauses were seen as hesitation. Her quiet, careful tone was mistaken for insecurity. Even her best answers landed flat. She left the room thinking she had done okay. Maybe not amazing, but okay. But when the call came, it was bad news. She didn't get the job. Not because she wasn't qualified. Not because she wasn't smart. But because of a story her body told before her words could. Daniel wasn't the most experienced candidate. He was younger than most of the others interviewing for the leadership role. On paper, he had fewer years, fewer titles, fewer accomplishments. But when Daniel walked into the room, everything about his presence told a different story. He walked tall, shoulders back, eyes calm and steady. His handshake was firm, warm, deliberate. He smiled, not a plastered-on nervous smile, but the kind that reached his eyes. In those first seconds, the panel's brains had already labeled him confident, trustworthy, leader. Did he stumble over an answer or two? Absolutely. Did he have gaps in his experience? Sure. But because the first impression was so strong, those mistakes were forgiven. The panel looked for evidence to support what they already believed, that Daniel was the right fit. He walked out of the room with the offer in hand. 2 candidates. 2 very different outcomes. The difference wasn't skill. It wasn't knowledge. It wasn't preparation. It was those first seconds, tiny, almost invisible cues that spoke louder than their words. But let's step away from job interviews. Because first impressions shape far more than careers. They shape everything. Think about dating. How many times have you gone on a first date and known, almost instantly, whether there would be a second one? You hadn't heard the person's life story. You didn't know their values, their history, or their dreams. Yet your brain made a call in minutes, sometimes in seconds. I feel drawn to this person. Or this just isn't right. Or think about friendships. Maybe you've met someone at a party and felt an immediate spark. The kind where you think, this person just gets me. And maybe you've also met someone who didn't do anything wrong, but something about them put you on edge. No crime, no insult, just a feeling. And here's the kicker. It works in reverse, too. Other people are forming those same snap judgments about you. Every time you walk into a room, every time you shake a hand, every time you say hello, they're writing the first chapter of your story before you've even had the chance to speak. That's why first impressions are so powerful. They're not just casual opinions. They're sticky, and they shape the path forward. Once someone decides you're confident, trustworthy, kind, they look for proof of that. And once someone decides you're awkward, arrogant, or unprepared, they look for proof of that too. Think about it. The colleague who got promoted instead of you. Maybe their first impression carried more authority. The friend you made in college who's still in your life 10 years later. Maybe it began with nothing more than an easy laugh in the first 5 minutes. The stranger you didn't trust at a glance. Maybe nothing they did could ever convince you otherwise. We like to imagine that relationships are built slowly, brick by brick, over weeks and months. But the foundation, the soil, that everything grows in, is those fleeting, fragile seconds at the beginning. And here's the truth. This isn't just about them. It's about you. Because just as you are judged, you are also judging. Every day, without realizing it, your brain is making lightning-fast decisions, safe or unsafe, friend or foe, capable or incompetent, trustworthy or not. These judgments guide who you hire, who you date, who you let into your circle, and who you quietly keep at arm's length. We like to think we're rational beings, but in reality, we're storytellers. And the story begins the moment our eyes meet someone else's. So let's pull back the curtain. What exactly is happening inside the brain during those fragile, fleeting moments when we meet someone new? At the heart of it are two major players, the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. The amygdala is our built-in alarm system. It doesn't think in words or reasoned logic. It reacts. For thousands of years, back in our tribal past, this was our survival tool. When a stranger walked into your camp, you didn't have hours to get to know them. You had seconds. Your amygdala had one job: decide if this person is safe or dangerous, friend or foe. And so even today, in the age of boardrooms and dating apps, that ancient wiring is still firing. When Sarah walked into her interview, when Daniel entered, the amygdala of everyone in that room was scanning them like radar. Posture, expression, tone, movement, safe or not, confident or not, competent or not. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, is rushing to put these signals into categories. It's not asking who is Sarah truly, in all her complexity. It's asking, what box does she fit into? The boxes are crude: confident or nervous, leader or follower, trustworthy or suspicious. But they're fast, and speed, in evolutionary terms, kept us alive. Here's where it gets fascinating. 10 research at Princeton showed that people form impressions of whether someone is trustworthy in just a tenth of a second. Think about that. Before you blink, before you even register someone's voice, your brain has already drawn a line in the sand. Safe or not safe. And the scary part, those first impressions don't just form quickly, they stick. Once your brain makes that decision, it clings to it. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. If your first impression is that someone is kind, you'll notice every smile and every nod, and you'll interpret them as proof. If your impression is that someone is cold, even their moments of warmth will feel forced. It's like putting on tinted glasses. From then on, everything you see is colored by that first filter. This also explains something called the halo effect. When we notice one positive trait, like attractiveness or confidence, our brains assume the person must have other positive traits, to intelligence, kindness, leadership. It's the mental shortcut that makes us think, she looks confident, so she must be competent. Of course, the opposite happens too. The horn effect. One negative cue, like a sloppy outfit or a distracted glance, can cast a shadow over everything else. Even if the person is brilliant, our brains keep whispering, something's off. Let me illustrate this with a study. Psychologist Nalan Ambady conducted what's now known as the thin slices experiment. Students watched silent 10-second video clips of professors teaching no words, just gestures and expressions. The students then rated the professor's effectiveness. Here's the twist. Those snap ratings matched almost perfectly with the evaluations of students who actually took the full course over an entire semester. 10 seconds, no words, same judgment. That's how powerful these thin slices of behavior are. But it doesn't stop there. Micro-expressions, those tiny flashes of emotion that cross the face in a fraction of a second, also tell the brain a story. A flicker of fear, a microsecond of irritation, a shadow of doubt. They're gone before you notice them consciously, but your amygdala records them. It adds them to the file. What does this tell us? That first impressions aren't just powerful, they're predictive. They guide choices that ripple into careers, relationships, even entire societies. Now, you might wonder, okay, but surely people can change their minds if they get to know you better. Yes, but it's much harder than you think. Once the brain locks onto an impression, it doesn't like to let go. It's like wet cement, soft at first, then quickly hardening. You can chip away at it, but the outline remains. Here's a metaphor. Imagine a courtroom. The very first impression someone makes is like the opening statement from the prosecution. Bold, confident, emotional. Everything afterward, every fact, every argument, is filtered through that statement. The defense can fight back, but the jury already has a story in mind. Or think of it like a movie trailer. You know how sometimes a trailer makes a movie look thrilling, and you walk in expecting brilliance. Even if the film is mediocre, you notice the exciting parts and forgive the flaws. But if the trailer was boring, you might not even buy the ticket. And if you do, you'll watch the movie through a skeptical lens. First impressions are the trailer to our lives. They set the tone long before the full story is told. And here's the twist. We're not just victims of this process. We're participants. Because while others are judging us, we are judging them, just as fast, just as unfairly. The person you decided to trust at first glance. The one you dismissed with no real reason. The good vibe, or the bad vibe, you couldn't explain. That wasn't intuition alone. It was your amygdala and your prefrontal cortex writing a story in milliseconds. The danger, of course, is when we forget this. When we mistake first impressions for truth instead of shortcuts. Because while they were built to help us survive in the wild, today they can cost us opportunities, friendships, even justice. But here's the paradox. Despite all their flaws, first impressions often feel accurate. And sometimes, they are. They're not magic, they're just the brain reading cues at lightning speed. And those cues, posture, tone, eye contact, micro-expressions, matter more than most of us realize. So the question becomes, what exactly are those cues? What is the brain looking for in those thin slices of behavior that makes us decide so quickly whether someone is trustworthy, likable, competent, or dangerous? That's what we'll explore next. So, now that we know the brain is making these lightning-fast judgments, the next question is, based on what? What are the actual cues that shape a first impression? What are people's brains scanning for, often without them even realizing it? The truth is, it's rarely just one thing. It's not just the handshake, or the smile, or the outfit. It's a symphony of signals, large and small, that come together to form what we call a vibe. And once that vibe is set, it's very hard to undo. Let's break down the instruments in that symphony. Eyes are powerful. They are the first and fastest way to people connect. Too little eye contact, and the mind whispers, something's wrong here. Are they hiding something? Are they insecure? Too much, and it tips into intimidation, the kind of stare that feels like a challenge rather than a welcome. The sweet spot is natural. Steady eye contact, just enough to say, I see you, I'm here, I'm paying attention. MIT researchers found that even infants respond differently to direct eye contact. Their brains light up in patterns that suggest recognition and connection. We're wired from birth to notice when someone meets our gaze. That doesn't go away in adulthood. Think about Sarah from part 1. Her inability to hold eye contact didn't consciously scream insecure to her interviewer, but subconsciously, that signal was loud and clear. Our bodies are always communicating, whether we want them to or not. Crossed arms, slouched shoulders, fidgeting fingers. They whisper defensiveness, discomfort, lack of confidence. Contrast that with an open stance. Shoulders back, chin up, arms relaxed at your sides. Instantly, the brain of the person across from you registers. This person is comfortable. This person belongs here. Amy Cuddy's famous research on power poses sparked debate. But the deeper point remains. Posture doesn't just influence how others see us, it influences how we see ourselves. Stand tall, and not only does the world read confidence in you, you actually feel more confident. Daniel, remember, gave off that impression, not by accident, but through presence. His body told the story before his words ever did. Smiles, frowns, raised brows. Our faces leak emotion, and they do it faster than we can control. A genuine smile, the kind that engages the small muscles around the eyes. The Dushan smile communicates warmth, honesty, and trustworthiness. A fake smile, just lips pulled back with no eye involvement, gets spotted almost instantly. The amygdala is particularly good at detecting insincerity, even before conscious thought catches up. Think of the last time you saw a photo where someone's smile looked off. You couldn't explain why, but you felt it. That was your brain reading a micro-signal that words couldn't mask. We like to think words carry meaning, and they do. But tone often carries more. Pitch, speed, rhythm, volume, warmth. All of these shape whether someone sounds trustworthy, confident, uncertain, or even deceptive. A study from the University of Glasgow found that people judged trustworthiness from voices in as little as 500 milliseconds. High-pitched, rushed voices were often rated as nervous. Calm, steady tones were judged as more reliable. Think about a time you heard someone say, "I'm fine," but their tone told you they weren't. That's how tone overpowers words. We're told not to judge a book by its cover, but our brains are wired to do exactly that. It's not only about beauty or fashion, it's about congruence. Does the way you look match the context you're in, and the story you want to tell? Imagine showing up to a finance job interview in ripped jeans and sneakers. It doesn't mean you're not brilliant, but the mismatch screams louder than your resume. On the flip side, dressing in a way that fits the environment, not overdressed, not underdressed, but aligned, lets the brain relax. This person belongs here. Psychologists call this enclothed cognition. What you wear affects not just how others perceive you, but how you perceive yourself. A lab coat makes people more attentive on cognitive tests. A suit makes people feel more authoritative. Clothes aren't just fabric. They're signals. Beyond the obvious lies the subtle. A quick glance at the floor. A nervous laugh. A hesitation before answering. None of them mean much alone, but together, they create an overall impression. This is what people mean when they say, "I don't know why, but I didn't get a good vibe," or "something about them just felt right." It's your brain tallying up hundreds of micro-signals and translating them into intuition. Neuroscience shows that humans are remarkably good at this. We pick up on body tension, micro-expressions, breathing rhythms, even pupil dilation, often without conscious awareness. Your gut feeling is often your brain doing complex math in the background. And here's the fascinating part. These cues don't just influence how others see you. They influence how you feel about yourself. When you stand tall, make eye contact, smile authentically, and speak in a warm, steady tone, your brain rewards you with a chemical cocktail: confidence, calmness, clarity. The signals you send reinforce the state you're in. That means first impressions are not just something that happen to you. They're something you can actively shape by training the cues you send, by choosing the signals your body broadcasts. Let's step back. Imagine walking into a room as if it were a silent audition. You have no script, no words, just posture, eye contact, tone, facial expressions, clothing, micro cues. What story is your body telling before your voice even begins? The truth is, we're all auditioning, every day, whether we like it or not. And the audience isn't waiting for the monologue. They've already written the review by the time you've walked on stage. But here's the good news. Because these cues are specific and trainable, you don't have to be trapped by them. You can learn to manage them, to align them, to make them serve the story you want to tell. And that brings us to the real challenge. If these impressions form so quickly, and if they're so sticky, can we change them once they've been made? Or better yet, can we learn to master them from the very beginning? That's exactly what we'll uncover in the next part. We've spent the last parts uncovering how first impressions form in a tenth of a second, often before you've spoken a word. We've seen how sticky they are, how unfair they can feel, how powerful they are in shaping the jobs we get, the relationships we form, the trust we earn. But here's the question that matters most. What do we do with this knowledge? If first impressions are so fast and so stubborn, are we doomed to be judged forever by a single smile, a single glance, a single handshake? Or is there a way to master these fragile moments, to change the narrative, to make sure the story people tell about us is the one we actually want to be told? The answer is yes, and the journey begins not with others, but with ourselves. Imagine walking into a room and not realizing you're slouching. Your eyes are darting. Your voice is trembling. To you, it's invisible. To everyone else, it's screaming. Most people, like Sarah in our earlier story, sabotage themselves not out of incompetence, but out of unawareness. She didn't know her body language was undermining her brilliance. She thought only her words mattered. Awareness is the first step to mastery. Once you see the invisible, you can change it. Try this exercise. Film yourself walking into a room and greeting someone. Then watch it back, with no sound. What does your body say? Does it say, I'm confident, I belong? Or does it say, I'm small, I don't fit here? Awareness is like switching on the lights in a dark room. Suddenly, you see what was always there. And what you see, you can change. For decades, psychologists have studied how people judge each other. And over again, two dimensions appear: warmth and competence. But here's the secret. Warmth always comes first. If someone seems cold, distant, unapproachable, their competence doesn't matter. You'll respect them, maybe, but you won't trust them. And trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship. This is why great leaders don't walk into a room and immediately list their achievements. They connect first. They shake hands, ask questions, laugh at small things. They show warmth. Then, and only then, do they demonstrate competence. Think of it like a sequence. I like you gives, I trust you gives, I respect you. Skip the first two, and the last one never arrives. Presence is one of those rare qualities that can't be faked. You know it when you feel it. It's the manager who looks you in the eye and makes you feel like the only person in the room. It's the friend who listens without glancing at their phone. It's the stranger who greets you with focus instead of distraction. Neuroscience reveals that attention is contagious. When someone gives us their full focus, our brains mirror it. We feel valued, we relax, we lean in. Practical ritual. Before entering a conversation, imagine dimming every light in the room, except one spotlight, shining only on the person you're meeting. Let your attention rest fully there. Their brain will feel it, even if they can't explain why. That's presence. People don't just listen to words. They scan 3 channels: what you say, how you say it, what your body does while saying it. If those 3 align, the brain relaxes, authentic. If they conflict, the brain tenses. Something's off. Congruence is why some leaders inspire with simple words, while others bore with brilliance. It's not vocabulary, it's alignment. Remember, the brain doesn't just ask, are they right? It asks, do they believe in themselves? There's a myth that making a good first impression means being flawless. But often, the strongest impression comes from imperfection embraced with honesty. Imagine someone at a meeting saying, I'll be honest, I'm a little nervous, but I'm grateful to be here. That line, spoken with warmth, doesn't diminish them. It humanizes them. It builds trust. Brené Brown's research shows vulnerability is the birthplace of connection. People don't remember you for being perfect. They remember you for being real. But what if the damage is done? What if you made a bad first impression? Here's the sobering truth. You can't erase it instantly. But here's the hopeful truth. You can rewrite it over time. Psychologists call this the slow drip effect. Each new positive encounter is like a drop of water, slowly reshaping hardened stone. Consistency is the chisel. Story: a manager once described a new hire as cold after their first meeting. But over months, the new hire consistently showed kindness, humor, and collaboration. Eventually, the manager admitted, I don't know why I thought you were cold. You're one of the warmest people I know. The first impression never fully vanished, but it was overwritten by a stronger narrative. Perhaps the most overlooked piece of this puzzle is the impression you make on yourself. If your inner dialogue says, I don't belong, your body broadcasts it. Slouched posture, weak voice, averted eyes. But if you remind yourself, I belong here, I have something to offer, your body echoes that belief. The shift is subtle, but profound. Rituals matter. Athletes slap their chests before running onto the field. Speakers take deep breaths before stepping on stage. Soldiers align their uniforms before marching. These aren't empty habits. They're ways of telling themselves, I am ready, I am enough. So, how do we put all of this into action? Here's a simple 60-second ritual to practice before any important encounter. Pause, close your eyes, take 3 slow breaths. Calm your nervous system. Posture: plant your feet, roll your shoulders back, lift your chin, tell your body, we belong here. Smile, recall a moment of genuine joy. Let it touch your eyes. Focus. Choose to give the next person your full attention, as if they are the only person in the world. Lead with warmth. Begin with a question, a smile, a small act of humanity. Then, once the bridge is built, let competence walk across it. This takes less than a minute, but it changes the chemistry of your body, the tone of your voice, the cues you broadcast, and the story you tell. Mastery isn't built in one day. It's built in repetition. Every time you practice awareness, warmth, presence, consistency, vulnerability, you're not just making impressions on others, you're rewiring your own brain. Over time, this doesn't just change how people see you, it changes how you see yourself. You stop trying to fake confidence, because confidence becomes your default. You stop forcing warmth, because warmth becomes natural. First impressions will never stop being powerful. They're too deeply rooted in our biology. They'll always be fast, sticky, sometimes unfair. But here's the gift. They are not accidents. They are not fate. They are habits of presence, alignment, and humanity. Every room you walk into, every hand you shake, every smile you give, it's the opening line of your story, and you get to choose how it's written. Will it say nervous, distracted, uncertain, or will it say confident, warm, authentic? The choice isn't made in the moment. It's made in the preparation, the awareness, the habits you practice daily. And once you master that choice, you don't just change how others see you. You change the opportunities you attract, the trust you build, the relationships you keep. So the next time you step into a room, remember, you're not just entering a space, you're stepping onto a stage. The curtain rises in 1/10 of a second, and the story people tell about you begins. Before you say a single word, we've come a long way in this journey. We began with stories, Sarah and Daniel, two people with the same qualifications, the same preparation, but radically different outcomes. Sarah lost an opportunity because her body whispered insecurity before her words could prove competence. Daniel gained one because his posture, tone, and presence told a leadership story before his resume was even read. From there we opened the brain, the amygdala scanning like radar for threat or safety, the prefrontal cortex racing to place strangers into boxes. We saw how, in 1/10 of a second, our minds create labels, trustworthy, arrogant, warm, cold, and how those labels become sticky, shaping every perception that follows. We uncovered the cues, eyes that connect or avoid, posture that shrinks or expands, smiles that glow or falter, voices that soothe or unsettle, appearances that align or clash, micro-cues that add up into what we call a vibe. And then we asked, can we change it? Can we master it? We saw that mastery isn't about perfection, but about practice, about awareness, about warmth before competence, about presence, about consistency, about the courage to be vulnerable, about rewriting bad impressions with the slow drip of repeated kindness, about rehearsing not just for others, but for ourselves, because the first impression we make is always the one we make on our own reflection. So what does this all mean? And how do we carry it with us after this episode ends? Let's be honest. First impressions are not always fair. They're shaped by biases, stereotypes, fleeting cues. Sometimes they mislead us. Sometimes they cost us opportunities we deserve. But here's the paradox. They are also universal. Everyone you meet is living under the same rules. You judge as quickly as you are judged. You glance at a face, hear a tone, feel a handshake, and your brain writes a story just as fast. Understanding this doesn't just give us power over how we're seen, it gives us compassion for how we see others. That nervous colleague, that quiet student, that stranger who seemed distant, maybe their cues told a story their heart didn't mean to tell. People won't remember the exact words you said when you introduced yourself. They won't recall the statistics you cited or the polished lines you rehearsed. But they will remember how you made them feel. Did they feel safe? Did they feel seen? Did they feel dismissed or valued? That feeling is the impression that lingers, echoing long after the details are forgotten. And the gift of this truth is liberating. You don't need to be flawless. You need to be human, present, warm. Before anyone else writes your story, you write it first. If you tell yourself, I'm not enough, your posture, tone, eyes will betray it. If you tell yourself, I belong here, your body carries that truth forward. That's why rituals matter. Athletes chant before games. Musicians breathe before concerts. Leaders steady themselves before speeches. They're not just performing for others, they're convincing themselves, and once they believe, others do too. Mastery of first impressions isn't about manipulating others. It's about aligning yourself, your inner belief, with your outer presence. Yes, first impressions are sticky, but they're not permanent. They can be rewritten with time, with consistency, with patience. Think of it like water on stone. The first groove cut deep, but drip by drip, another path can be carved. Each smile, each gesture, each authentic moment adds weight to a new story until the old one weakens. This is why showing up matters, not once, but over and over. Because while impressions are fast, trust is slow, and the slow story always wins in the end. Every room you enter is a stage, not because life is fake, but because life is witnessed. Every handshake is an opening line. Every smile is a prologue. Every glance, posture, tone is a paragraph in the story people will tell about you. And here's the part we often forget. We get to choose. Not the whole story. Life is too messy for that, but the first line that we can write. In the end, the most powerful first impression isn't about impressing. It's about connecting. You don't win people over with perfect polish. You win them over by being present, authentic, human. By making them feel, in those first fragile seconds, with me, you are safe. With me, you are seen. With me, you matter. And when you do that, everything else, competence, respect, trust, follows naturally. So as you walk away from this episode, carry this truth with you. First impressions are not fate, they're habits, they're choices, they're rehearsals of presence that we practice every day. The next time you step into a room, don't think, how do I impress? Instead, think, how do I connect? Straighten your shoulders, lift your eyes, breathe, smile, lead with warmth. Because in the end, the hidden science of first impressions isn't just about how others see you. It's about how you choose to show up in the world. And when you show up with presence, with authenticity, with humanity, the story people tell about you won't just begin well. It will be worth reading all the way through. And so, here we are, at the end of our journey together in today's episode. The hidden science behind first impressions. Think back for a moment to where we began. I asked you to imagine Sarah walking into her dream job interview. Brilliant, prepared, yet undone by a few small signals that whispered louder than her words. Then Daniel, less experienced, but carried by a presence and warmth that tilted the scales in his favor. Their stories weren't just theirs. They were mirrors of moments you and I have lived. The first meetings that shaped our paths. The conversations that started with a glance. The fragile seconds that seemed so small at the time, but later revealed themselves as turning points. In part 2, we went beneath the surface, into the brain's hidden machinery. The amygdala scanning faces like a radar. The prefrontal cortex rushing to categorize. The shocking speed, a tenth of a second, faster than a blink, faster than a breath. In part 3, we listened to the symphony of cues: eyes, posture, smiles, tone, clothes, microsignals, all combining to create what we call a vibe. Some of those cues we send consciously, many we send without knowing. But together, they become the story others hear before we speak. In part 4, we asked the hardest question: can we change it? And we found that mastery is possible, not through perfection, but through practice, through awareness, through warmth before competence, through presence, through congruence of body, tone, and words, through the courage to be vulnerable, through the slow drip of consistency that rewrites old judgments, and most of all, through the impression we make on ourselves, the inner story that leaks out before we even realize it. And in part 5, we gathered these threads into something bigger, a philosophy of connection. That first impressions are fast, sticky, sometimes unfair, but also human, universal, and transformable. That the opening line of our story is always being written, and we have more power than we think to choose what it says. And now, here we are. I want to pause here, not for science, but for gratitude. Thank you, truly, for listening, for reflecting, for walking with me through this landscape of psychology and humanity. I know you could have been anywhere, listening to music, watching a show, scrolling endlessly, but instead, you chose to be here. To invest your attention, the most precious currency of our time. And I don't take that lightly, because attention is intimacy. It is presence, and you gave me yours. For that, I'm deeply grateful. Before we part, I want to invite you into something small, simple, but powerful. Sometime this week, you'll meet someone new. Maybe a stranger at a cafe. Maybe a colleague you haven't spoken to much. Maybe a friend of a friend. In that moment, pause, breathe, straighten your posture, meet their eyes. Smile, not because you have to, but because you choose to. Let yourself be fully there, even for just 10 seconds. Then notice. Notice how they shift. Notice how you shift. That's the science we've explored, alive in your life. But don't stop there. Because first impressions aren't just about interviews or dates. They're about life itself. Every morning, when you wake up and look in the mirror, you're making a first impression on yourself. Every time you step into a new space, you're giving others a preview of the story they'll read about you. And every time you choose warmth, presence, and authenticity, you're not just shaping how the world sees you. You're shaping the kind of world we all live in. A world with a little more trust, a little more kindness, a little more connection. And if today left you curious, if it sparked reflection or even discomfort, stay with me, because this is only one part of the larger story. In our next episodes, we'll dive into other hidden forces. Why we sometimes sabotage ourselves, even when we know better. Why loneliness cuts so deeply in an age where we're more connected than ever. Why emotions can hijack reason, and how to work with them instead of against them. These aren't just academic questions, they're daily realities. They shape how we love, how we work, how we dream. And I promise, exploring them together will not only give you knowledge, but also tools to live more fully. So, as we close today, let me leave you with this. Every handshake, every smile, every glance, every first hello. They're not small, they're seeds. And from them grow careers, friendships, romances, communities. They are the beginning of stories that can last years, sometimes lifetimes. You don't need to control every detail. You don't need to be flawless. You don't need to perform. You only need to be human. To show up as yourself, with presence and warmth. Because in the end, the hidden science of first impressions is not about manipulation. It's about connection. About remembering that beneath the snap judgments and sticky labels, we're all just people, hoping to be seen, to be valued, to belong. And if you can leave someone in those fragile first seconds, feeling safe, seen, and significant, then you've already made the best impression possible. So thank you, once again, for being here. Thank you for lending me your ears, your thoughts, your imagination. Until we meet again, may you carry this truth with you. The opening line of your story is always being written, and you have the pen. I'll see you in the next chapter.